All right, Doug, how you doing today?
Well, Alex, I'm doing great. Thanks for having me here.
Yeah, appreciate it. Doug, it's been fun getting to know you here just briefly, but why don't you tell me a little bit about yourself and kind of what you're known for? And then I'd love to go back because I saw on your bio it said you started working at age 3, which that feels like some sort of a legal quagmire there. But we won't start there. Just tell us about what you're up to now.
Childhood labor laws back
Yeah,
then.
I didn't
They
say
were,
it. You said it.
well, it was my father's business, so it was a good. By the way, I loved it when I was 3 years old
Yeah,
because I used to sweep floors and they paid me 25 cents a week. And back then, you could buy candy for a handful for a penny.
there you go.
So I pretty much went into a diabetic coma probably for the first 4 weeks of working there.
Yeah.
And they would take me to what people would call in the West the saloon, in the East we would call you know, uh, an eatery.
Mm.
They'd prop me up on the bar stool, and I'd have my little Coca-Cola, and they would have their lunch and their beer, and I loved it. I got to hang out with the adults. I heard my mother wasn't really happy about that, but all my brothers went through the same thing. So to answer your question, we have three ventures that we're involved in. One is a insurance company.
Okay.
So we have, uh, and so we built an insurance brokerage where we, have agents and agency model working on that. Two, I have an automated, personalized SaaS follow-up system
Mm.
that we have built. And the third one is I still consult for companies on what most people call predictable revenue growth. So we have a math-based, metrics-based sales optimization process for predictably growing revenues, and thus profits usually go up as well.
What kind of insurance is the business in? And
Uh,
how'd you get into
yeah,
that? That seems like a little bit of a kind of, not to say a detour from what I've read about you, but
yeah. Well, it's actually a newer company that we started. So a friend of mine called me. He's a very successful guy. Built billions of dollars worth of companies, and he said, I'd like to know if you'd like to go into, we're going to start out with the life insurance business.
okay.
And I'd like you to, because I built agent channels for a long time in telecommunications. And so I built agencies essentially, with literally hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of working agents. So, and he said, what do you think? I said, absolutely not. Not
Yeah.
interested at all. Right. And then he started talking to me about the vision of the process and some of the people that were involved. And I said, I'll take a look. And what I realized, Alex, was, man, there's a couple of things. Number one, people don't understand insurance, and too many people don't even have it.
Hmm.
So they end of life, their families end up, having challenges.
Yeah. Yeah. It's costly to
And
die.
yeah, and I remember back it happened to my parents because my grandfather, my mother's father, when he passed away, he had insurance, but unbeknownst to the rest of the family, his son had cashed in the life insurance policy. He had talked to him, and then the son died before the grandfather, and
Oh,
the
geez.
grandfather, yeah, he had Alzheimer's, so no one knew.
Huh.
And and I grew up in I would say a relatively lower middle class, family economically. So my parents were forced to either mortgage their home to bury her father,
Mm.
or all us boys pitched in anyways and bailed it out. But that was the situation, right?
Mm.
So, or I had another friend. His name's Bill Brown, actually, and he was 26. He had his first child. Long story short, life insurance person trying to convince him to buy life insurance. He was very obstinate about it, and he finally acquiesced and said, "Oh, fine, just give me the paperwork." And he signed a $250,000 life insurance policy, I believe the number was. And 3 weeks later, his wife died,
Damn.
and he had a 3-month-old baby.
Mm.
And he told me the only thing that got him out of that was actually the life insurance money.
Mm.
So, putting all this together and realizing I can help people, make multi six figure incomes, helping them do that like we used to do in the other agencies. I was like, yeah, let's do it. And so I'm really glad we did. We call it Agents of Honor.
Hmm.
And, so we're actively looking for people who want to do that, as well as, shameless plug, blah, blah. But the good thing is, we have all the systems, processes, the training, but we have leads. So people
Mm.
don't have to go out and get their own leads. So, yeah, so that's, it is a deviation from what I normally do, because I normally stay in the B2B side of the world.
Hmm.
But I've been on the other side of the B2C, so to speak, helping companies and helping people, and even have built some companies in that arena. So
Mm.
here I am.
Well, take me back. So, what was your family involved in? It sounds like they owned businesses, and you saw entrepreneurship from a young age.
Yeah, my father was a type of guy that never wanted to work in a corporate environment,
Hmm.
but he had four boys that he had to support. So he was working for I would say, a middle management job in Raytheon Corporation.
Oh, okay.
And then they asked him to be part of a team to go open a plant in France. And my mother vehemently objected
Hmm.
to going there. And he told me one day he went into the office, and one of the guys had an ulcer, and he started throwing up blood all over the floor.
Jeez.
And he realized that was going to be him.
Yeah, sounds like a really stress-free environment. At Raytheon.
Yeah. I, uh, I know some people have worked there. They put their time in, collect their pension, and get out, most of them. But
Mm.
for my father, he was always wanting to do his own thing anyways. So while he was in the Navy, he was repairing industrial equipment, and there were ships and things like that with the electrical components. My dad had an engineering degree, electrical, and he was super brilliant in that field. So he decided, hey, I'm going to start this thing.
Hmm.
And he went and told his father, my grandfather on the other side. And my grandfather pitched a fit, told him, you got a really stable thing. And 2 days later, my grandfather got laid off from Toll Silversmiths
Uh.
after 26 years, if I remember correctly.
Hmm.
So my grandfather joined my dad, and they started this business together. And it started in 1962 when I was born, and they had it all the way up through 1980 when they got rid of the business.
I mean, I tell people all the time, like, if you think entrepreneurship is like risky, just wait until that day comes where like your company gets acquired, your company downsizes. AI comes for your job and your role. At least if you're a business owner, you get to be on the ship when it goes down, as opposed to just out on the island watching the ship go by.
Yeah, and sometimes you're not even told the ship is no longer at the port.
Yeah, right. We're not doing this shipment any longer.
Yeah,
Shipments
yeah,
are
yeah, yeah.
done. Yeah, right.
My brother was my oldest brother was a executive, most of the time executive, like vice president, that type of level for like Bose and big companies like that. And about every 2 years, he would get a pink slip,
Jeez.
and he'd walk in, they'd lock his office out, and here you go. Here's a 6 months, a year severance. Good luck. See you later.
Hmm.
So I watched that as well, and I just decided, look, I'm gonna go to the what I considered the bright side, and not be under anybody's tutelage, or I should say under their scrutiny or their decision making power on what I was going to do with my life. I did that for a little while in a corporate position, and I lasted about a year and a half.
Mm.
I guess I'm my father's son in that regard.
Yeah, was that a pretty early on decision? I see that you took your first business loan at 13, and I'd love to hear that story. But do you feel like that was like pretty early on, like maybe when you were young, you're like, yeah, I'm just gonna like do businesses, like that's what I'm gonna do.
I didn't even know what I was doing, honestly, Alex. All I knew was when I was about 6 years old, my father's business, we were brought out with help to actually start writing orders and selling stuff.
Okay.
And I was making 25 cents an hour at that point.
Well, that was probably and that's an enormous raise from your 25 cents a week.
That is true.
Yeah.
That is true. You know, I was making $10 a week.
Yeah. Well,
You know,
that's a 40x increase, man. You must have been doing a great job. Either that or you were doing a really bad job sweeping the floors.
I think the threat of the lawsuit I brought against my dad about how I no, I'm just kidding.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Not, all my brothers went through the same path, and I never asked my father. My dad died at 73, and I never had the chance to ask him the question: Did you do this by design, or what? What were you? Um, it was a family-run company. We had 14 employees,
Mm.
and I guess I was probably 14th and a quarter or something. And but we were learning to sell.
Mm-hmm.
We were talking to people and doing this. And I remember one day I wrote this order up, and we were putting the parts down, and we paid $10 for the part, and I sold it for 20. And I was like, in my little head, it was like, wait a minute, I'm working 40 hours for this $10. I just did this in like 6 minutes.
Mm-hmm.
Something needs to change. I wasn't sure what, but that's
Mm.
kind of what sparked it off. And then while I was working for my dad, I went out and I'm getting to the loan. I went out and decided to take a paper route because I was 6 and learned I wasn't old enough to get the paper route.
Mm-hmm.
So
In
I
the footsteps of Warren Buffett. I don't know if you've read his story, but he was like a paper route maven.
Well, no, I didn't. I haven't read that, so thanks for sharing it.
Yeah.
What I did was I approached my brothers. I had 3 older ones that were old enough to get the paper route,
Mm-hmm.
and they decided, sure, we'll take these paper routes. And so I went around and recruited the neighborhood kids to help deliver the papers, and that was my first sales management and operations job, I think. And it was fun, loved it, and then around age 13. I was always involved in music, and I wanted to start a music business. And so I had to buy equipment.
Mm-hmm.
And I went to the bank, and they said, "Nice try, kid. You're 13." And I said, "Well, what do I got to do?" And they said, "Well, you got to have someone who's 18 or older to actually co-sign the loan for you."
Mm.
And I said, "Okay." So I approached my middle brother, and I said, "Would you co-sign a loan for me?" And he said, "Sure." He was 19.
Mm.
And they gave me $1,300.
It's not bad.
No. And I went out and I built a band, and I built this and I built that, and I paid back the loan within a year, and it was fun. And then banking's different then, I guess, if it is now, because I remember when I turned 15, they actually gave me a credit line for $2,000, and I
Mm.
don't think I was old enough to even have a credit line at
Mm.
that point, but I knew the bank presidents by then. So yeah, I didn't really know what I was doing. I just wanted to do stuff. I wanted to create stuff. I wanted to, do something that just seemed fun.
Mm-hmm.
And so I did a lot of those little tiny businesses throughout life. Christmas tree retailing. I had landscaping companies. I had all kinds of different stuff, from anything I could just think to put my mind to. Never realized it was a business until I started actually getting to understand what business was all about.
Mm-hmm.
We had my cousin and I had a body shop. We would paint, repair cars, paint cars. So I'd use my dad's building for the spray booths, or my cousin, his father worked for Raytheon, and he used to spray the missiles that they used to make.
Mm-hmm.
So he had all the painting equipment. So we borrow his painting equipment, and we were doing pretty good. We were in I think I was like 17, just 16 and a half. I just got my license, and we were making between the two of us $500 a week,
That's
painting cars.
that's pretty good even nowadays, for a young person.
Yeah, we were doing great. And so I always had money, and it was, and I realized that money allows you to do two things, have the ability to go and do things you can't do normally without it. And two, to steal from Tony Robbins, it does allow you to arrive at your problems in style
Mm.
compared to arriving them in a different ways.
Yep.
So yeah, that's what I did. And I'm glad I did it. Some people thought I was unstable when I was younger because I was always doing these things. But it seemed to pay off in the long run.
Yeah, you know how they say that like a telltale sign of like a serial killer is as a kid they're like you know, killing cats or killing, squirrels.
Mm.
It's probably like a telltale sign of a successful entrepreneur that as like a 15 and 16-year-old, they're like, I own a body shop. I took out a loan and like I rehabbed a house. And you're like, dude, you're not even 18 yet. Like, and I don't know what that is, but I'm not saying every entrepreneur has that thing, but I would say a ton of entrepreneurs that I talk to have a very similar story to you. It may not even necessarily be like money driven. They're like, I want the money. It's just like they just thought it was like a cool, fun thing to do. It's almost like their sport. A lot of kids play sports, and some of these young people just want to do that.
Yeah, and it's interesting you bring that up because I did look at it that way. It was something I could, let's say, conquer or create or do something like that. I wasn't really thinking, wow, oh man, if I put a business plan in this and my P&L looks like this, or all of the things. And in fact, as I grew into that, I started looking at business as, money in equals money, money out equals something, right? So money, one minus the other. As I started applying all the business rules and things like that, sometimes I got involved in things and I was like, it just wasn't fun for me anymore. It'd be like a friend of mine loved gardening one time, and I approached him. He was a physician, and I said, "You love gardening?" He goes, "Yeah." And I said, "Well, I know a lot of people online." I said, "We could take your gardening thing, and you love organic gardening. We could go and package up information." And he looked at me and he said, "Don't you ruin this for me."
Yeah,
And,
right.
all
Yeah.
right. And so, I think it's when I was younger, it was just more of a matter of if I wanted something, like say I wanted to buy something, I wanted to buy a new car, I would just figure out a way that I could make money to do that.
Mm.
And it just happened to be in a business. Um, if I wanted to take, I don't know, my girlfriend out to a place and I just felt I couldn't afford it, I'd go figure out how can I, spend $200 back then on dinner or something like that, and I would just figure it out one way or another.
Mm.
Um,
Do you think
yeah, so that was it.
do you think you ever consciously kind of said to yourself like, oh, making money is not that hard? Because I feel like that's like a big barrier for a lot of people. They think that making money is really, really hard. And I'm not saying it is or it isn't, but it is in certain situations. And to make a lot of money is a lot harder, right? But
Yeah,
do you think you ever just consciously went like, this isn't that hard? Like, I need to make $1,500 to buy this car. I could do that.
yeah. Yeah, I mean, that was kind of the modus operandi of how I operated because I I never really thought about it. Like it was like I want X, this is how I'll create X.
Mm,
And I guess I was more of an opportunist in some capacity because like the blizzard of 78, 1978, oh God, I'm so old now. Because it seems like such a long time ago. But because my dad had an industrial repair company and a machinery repair company, sometimes people would bring in things like they brought in an industrial snowblower one time. The thing was monstrous. It was like, I could barely hold the thing. I was 16 years old.
hmm
And, but, they asked how much to repair it. And they said, no, we don't want to spend that much. So we repaired it anyways. And we brought it home to clear our driveways.
Yeah.
But when the blizzard of 78 in New England hit, and that was a lot of snow, and my friend Steve and I were like watching people shovel, and we're like, we have this monstrous snowblower. So why don't we just go ask people if we want to snow blow out and we'll charge them to do that.
hmm
And we did. And we made, I think it was $423 in a day snow blowing.
Not bad.
And my father, I remember him saying to me, where's my cut?
Yeah,
This
right.
whole
His
thing.
equipment rental. You didn't negotiate that equipment rental there, man. Um,
So yeah, so I would just come up with an idea, whether it was, hey, I can buy this car and sell this car again, which I did, or a boat or something like this. I find this was a reasonably good price on this. I could mark it up and sell it,
yeah.
and that's what I did.
Yeah, I don't want to I'm not trying to make this comparison, but I think you should read Warren Buffett's book, or it's his biography. It's called Snowball.
All right.
There's a lot of similarities. He was always just like doing these kooky business ideas. Like he did a paper route, and that was a big thing. And he was like an accomplished paper route boy. Like he was allowed to do, I think, like the Washington Post, which that was like a big deal. That was like
That's a big deal back then.
only the best paper boys could do this. And he
Yeah.
talks about how he got so good that he could like go up to an apartment like hallway and he could like fling each paper like the
Oh,
correct
yeah.
distance to get it right in front of the doors. He's like, because if I can do that, I can save time. I don't have to walk up and down the block. But he would do like golf ball collection, mark them up, resell them. Like he bought a limousine, and I think he was just like goofing around with it. Eventually, he'd like sell the car, and like, but yeah, it's like pinball machines. He did pinball machines. That was a big thing for him. You know.
Yeah, we actually looked at vending machines one time because we figured we can buy them, stick the stuff there. I mean, it was, and for me, it was a lot of small businesses. But to answer your question, it was pretty much like if I wanted something, I go figure out how to do it. But what I realized early on, which I kind of lost in the middle of my life's career, but then kind of came back to it, was it's really easy when you know who the ideal right fit buyer is.
Okay.
It's really not easy if you don't know who the ideal right fit buyer is.
Okay. Yep.
So like, not to get like religious or whatever, but if we walk into a Catholic church and start preaching Judaism or how to be a Protestant or,
Mm-hmm.
or a Muslim or some other religion, there might be a few takers in the church, but for the most part, it's not the ideal right fit buyer.
It's a tough sell. It's a tough sell.
It's a tough sell.
Yeah.
And so that's when it's really easy. And this is the part I think that a lot of people miss out on, Alex. They just don't think through that.
Mm.
Like when I was doing the paper route and we were trying to expand our routes, I would go to neighborhoods that were affluent who had a lot of like retirees in it.
Okay.
Because I figured they had money and a lot of time. What else to do but read the paper, right?
Yep,
So
makes sense to me.
And money wasn't an issue for a yearly subscription or whatever. So I think it was just, that made it a lot easier. And then when I didn't do that, it made it a lot tougher.
Are there businesses
Sometimes
that
non-existent.
Yeah, are there businesses that you went into, not later in life, but earlier in life that just you thought, oh, this is going to work, and it just totally did not work?
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. The body shop was one of those.
Hmm.
We had what was happening was we were pulling so much business from the local neighborhoods that the other body shops got together and they went to the zoning commissioner in the city and said, hey, these kids are operating without a license. And they came and shut us down. So, again, we didn't think through it too deeply. We looked at people who had rust on their car and that, looked like they had money. And we approached them and said, hey, do you want to fix that? Look at our pictures that did these cars with. Or back then they had vinyl roofs on the cars and the vinyl roofs would peel.
Yep.
And we knew how to repair vinyl roofs or strip them and put a new vinyl roof on. And, if you went to a body shop back then, it would cost you, $400 or $500 to do that. Well, we could do it for $200 and be super profitable. Right? And it took us basically an afternoon. So, we were really starting to gain traction there, but we never thought it through. So we got shut down for no permits.
Yeah.
And we couldn't get the permits because I wasn't old enough. I was 16 and a half.
Right. Government coming in, stopping things again. Right. That's funny. So how did you end up going into the military? Because it sounds like, based on what I'm hearing, a lot of these businesses were working, and if not, you were having fun and you were at least making enough money to kind of get by. But I see you did 12 years in the military. So where did that idea come from? Was that something that was in the family?
It was, grandfather was in, my dad was in, brothers were in, we have a long history going back to the American Revolution, right?
Okay.
That type of thing. So there was part of the legacy component of doing it. But at the same time, and this is like, I talk to a lot of younger people today in their early 20s or the late teens or whatever, even in their mid 20s, they're confused about what they want to do. Here I am, this scrambled brain little kid making money doing this or this and that, young guy. And everyone else is like, you got to have a career, you got to go to school, you got to have an education. And back then it was like not an option.
Mm.
Like today, I don't know if college pays off for most kids. I'm not saying don't go to college. I'm not like against it. But when you look at it, you know, coming out with a $200,000 bill with an English degree, yeah,
Yeah.
it's just not like, it doesn't, you know. So even with my children, I'm like, do you know what you want to do? No. Let's go find a school that is reasonable. Like they were looking at BU and Harvard and you know, all these, and I'm like, what do you want to do? And they're like, I don't know, Dad. I'm like, why don't we try the University of Maine,
Yeah.
you know, for your first foray, because where you get your undergrad doesn't really matter that much anyways, right?
Yeah.
Um, so, you know, and then when they went through it, they were like, you know what? I got my degree. I don't really want to go on.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, $75,000 I just saved, you know, that type of thing,
Yeah.
right? So, but back then it was, you had to have a degree in order to be considered acceptable to society. So I thought,
Mm-hmm.
you know, my dad had a degree. My grandfather didn't, you know, he quit. He went out to work when he was in the 8th grade,
Mm.
but he did go on to extension school and even at MIT, and he passed at MIT. You know, so I have brain side, you know, on my family, which I think I got some of that. But yeah, so I wanted to go in there, and I was like, well, you know what? Maybe I'll go be a military officer. And then when I was looking into that, they won't pay for college if you
Mm.
were a military officer unless you went in into like the academy or something like that. And frankly, my grades weren't good enough to get me into the academy.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I was a B minus student at best,
Mm-hmm.
right? So I decided, you know what, they'll pay for it if I'm an enlisted guy. So I went in, and that's why I went into school, was to, you know, I was into the Army to. I didn't, 3 reasons: didn't know what the heck I wanted to do, thought I had to have a degree to get anywhere in life.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, it was a legacy play as well. You know, my dad was super proud the day I left. I mean, I remember the look on his face and shaking my hand and the hug and all that stuff. So, yeah,
So you eventually did 12 years in the U.S. Army. What was that like?
I had a lot of great times. I did 12 years and 7 days. I
Okay.
remember when I got out. And, you know, between the regulars and then I did some in the reserves, you know, I met a lot of good people. I had a lot of good friends, experienced some fun and some tragedies,
Mm.
you know. And when you start to see people, you know, one guy was in, you know, a peacekeeping mission over in Europe, and he stepped on a landmine,
Mm.
and, you know, that was the end. And so, you know, he had a wife and 2 little girls. And I had 2 little girls at the time.
Mm.
And that made me really think, like, okay, you know what? Because I planned on doing the 20
Mm.
and you know, doing it out, but I was like, you know, I don't want that to be my legacy to my kids.
Mm-hmm.
And so I decided to get out.
Mm.
You know, I figured I've done longer time than most people, and you know, I did my job and my duty as, you know, to the country, and so that's why I got out. But I, you know, I learned a lot of really great things, and I learned, you know, you learn a lot of things in the military that I don't think you learn outside of certain situations. You know, like you can pretty much get through anything you have to for 60 days,
Mm-hmm.
you know, that type of thing. And as bad as it seems sometimes, it can always get worse or get better. And so we focus on what we can control versus what we can't.
Mm.
You know, just lessons like that came out: discipline, grit. You know, I think it was a great experience for me. And, you know, I don't regret it at all. The only thing I do say that I wish I had done is I probably should have gone into the, Air Force versus the Army.
Mm.
Because when it was 18 below degrees, we were sleeping on the ground and they were sleeping in a building.
Mm-hmm.
So, but you know, c'est la vie.
So what's life look like when you get out? You get out and you're probably what, like lower 30s, something like that.
Yeah, yeah.
And how are you thinking about like what happens next in life?
So, you know, I always had side businesses through the military too.
Okay.
So I was always doing that. That never stopped. You know, the drive, the bug, so to speak. Um, and when I got out, I had a degree in biology and I had a degree in business.
Okay.
And so they were like, "Hey, become an officer." And I'm like, "No, I'm out. You know, I'm not going to do that." And then I was like, "Well, what am I going to do with my life?" And I'm like, "I'll be a doctor. What the hell?"
Oh, all right.
Right?
Yep. Why not?
So because I had most of the pre-medical requirements done, I applied to a couple of schools. I got accepted, um, and I wasn't out yet, and so I was still in while I went there. And then 2 months before I was going to be able to get out, the Gulf War kicked in.
Okay.
And so I get a letter in the mail saying, "Congratulations, you're going to be staying here for a little while." And so I had to go tell the medical schools I can't get in because I'm on alert to go.
Yeah.
And thank goodness it ended early.
Mm-hmm.
But they still held my enlistment. So then by the time the enlistment came out, I had to reapply to get back into the schools. And while I was there, one of the doctors at where I got my undergrad said, "Hey, why don't you do a degree in nuclear medicine while you're waiting?" And I said, "What's that?" Right. And he told me, and I was like, "Nah, you know." I said, "I got to wait anyways." It was like 4 weeks before school was starting.
Mm-hmm.
And he said, "Here's a pen." And I said, "Well, thanks." He goes, "Here's a paper." I said, "What's this?" He goes, "Sign your name on this paper." And I said, "Why?" He says, "I've known you for 6 years. Sign your name." And so I signed my name, and he said, "Welcome to the nuclear medicine department."
Mm.
Um, so I did my degree in nuclear medicine.
What does
And
that mean? Nuclear medicine.
so it was a certified nuclear medicine technologist. So basically, what you do is you make up radioactive material and you mix it with what they would call an agent or reagent.
Mm-hmm.
It's called tagging, and you would image the body for pathology
Got it.
or physiology. So the difference between nuclear medicine and an X-ray is in nuclear medicine, you've got to be alive. It's got to have cellular activity,
Okay.
or you won't get a picture. So we would do things like spot blood clots and cancers and things like that. And that was a super wonderful thing for me to go through because it really taught me about how fragile life is.
Mm.
Like, I saw stuff in the military, but you're still in your like 20s and 30s and you're not thinking. But now I'm seeing people in their 60s and 70s and, end of life sentences and things like that. And I got to talk to all of them and they would tell me about things. And so, long story short, I decided that being in the hospital wasn't for me.
Mm-hmm.
And the capper came where I was down in so the doctors have a room, they call it the wet room, where they read all the films and all this other stuff. And I was in there one day delivering some results, and I think it was 11 doctors were in that room. And they all surrounded me, Alex, got around me.
Mm-hmm.
And they said, "We hear you going back to medical school." And I said, "Yep, that's the plan." They said, "Don't do that." And I said, "What?" And they said, "Don't do that. You're going to give up another 6 years of your life. And we've been talking about you, and we think you have better things to do in life."
Interesting. Wow.
I was like, "What?"
What do you think they meant by that?
Well, they told me. They said, "You have greater aspirations in life than just to be a doctor."
I see.
And so it made me think, because I was like, what is this? I didn't know what the universe was back then. I didn't know what the whispers of the universe and stuff like that. But so I went thinking, and while I was going through that nuclear medicine degree, I was actually selling music equipment.
Okay.
And so something clicked in my head because I realized I was making more money selling music equipment than I was working in the hospital. And if I applied myself in that discipline, I could make as much as the doctors were making.
Mm-hmm.
And then I was hanging around with like all these cool people,
Mm-hmm.
didn't have hepatitis, AIDS, worried about needle sticks, any of that stuff that could have happened. And, because I was hanging out with bands, and these were like Aerosmith and
Might
Billy Joel
I mean, let's not totally remove the possibility of needle sticks and
and needle
hepatitis.
sticks.
Let's not say that was a 0% chance.
Yeah, there could have been some needle sticks
Yeah.
that I wasn't around,
Yeah.
but yeah, you know, but these were great, great people, and they were all over the radio, and Boston, the band Boston. I used to, know Barry Goodrow and Brad Delp, and Sibby the drummer, and Sibby's daughter is married to The Rock today, that type of thing.
Geez.
So these were the people I was hanging out with. Denny Lane from Paul McCartney and the Wings. People played with like old bands, new bands, solo artists. Extreme was one of them. The More Than Words guys. I don't know if you ever heard
Oh
that
yeah.
song.
Oh, of course.
Those guys are amazing. Jake Giles. All these like really cool people. And Barry said to me one day, Doug, you're really good at what you do. Why don't you go to music school? So I'm like, all right, where do I go? He goes, apply to like the conservatory, apply in Boston. And I'm like, all right. So I applied to Berklee College of Music thinking they'll never let me in here. And they let me in. So I went to Berklee for a while. And during that period of time, I started selling telecommunication services for a multi-level marketing company.
Okay, interesting.
And I quickly rose up the ranks in that. And what I started thinking is my brain works this way. It's like, wait a minute. Long distance back then was 50 cents a minute.
Yeah.
Right. And so we were selling it at like 30, whatever the heck it was, 30, 35, right? Whatever, 40 cents a minute. And I said, there's got to be a better way. I'm talking to business owners, and they got these high bills. We should be able to bring them down, and blah, 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 blah. So I started sniffing around, and I found this company called LDDS WorldCom. And I took an agreement with them, and they had a rate that was 28 cents a minute. And so I was walking into businesses going, how much are you paying for your long distance services? And they go, well, 50 cents a minute. I said, I have it at 28. And they're like, give me the paper. Right? And so I started signing.
How were they getting such a low rate?
I never even knew. But they were a new company that came in. And eventually that company became a company called MCI. And then it was called WorldCom, MCI WorldCom. And they were the second largest phone carrier in the country. So it was AT&T and then MCI. So I had an original contract with them. And so by the time I was, they were starting to rise up through the ranks, I was getting contracts for 15 cents a minute with this company. And I was just going out and just killing it.
Right.
Like it was
just like shooting a fish in a barrel, as they say.
Oh, I was, right fit buyer, right? So, hey, you're spending $5,000 a month. Let me bring you down to, to $2,000 a month or whatever the number was at that time. And oh, by the way, I get paid on this. I get 15 to 25% on the back end.
So how would that commission work? Like an ongoing basis? Like
ongoing, as long as they had the agreement, as long as they stayed on the carrier. So now you go out and sell $100,000 and you're getting 20% on average. You're getting $20,000 a month recurring revenue.
Yeah, that's like a salesperson's dream, easy sell, good margin, recurring rev.
Yeah. So I built that business up to just under, it was 900. I remember being pissed off because I ran the numbers in December 31st. And it was $998,500 coming in.
Just a couple of lunch breaks sold you short.
I just wanted to get over the million, right? And I called everybody on that day, and I just couldn't get over the million at that moment. No. But it was from there it was like I never went back. I just was like, that's it. You know what I mean? Like, and so I built telecom agencies. I built other traditional businesses, and eventually that led me to help a company that well, you're in marketing. I don't know if you remember. His name was J. Conrad Levinson. He had a series called Guerrilla Marketing.
I remember the name. Yeah.
So eventually, what was happening is I would go into these companies and I was looking at what they were doing, and I would suggest things on how they can improve their sales revenue or suggest this, and they were implementing them and getting results.
Mm-hmm.
So somebody turned me on to Jay, and I worked with his nephew, and I helped their company grow a bit. So Jay introduced me to a guy named Chet Holmes, and Chet Holmes wrote a book called The Ultimate Sales Machine.
Mm-hmm.
And I said to Chet, hey, I got my own businesses. Do you mind if I coach for your company and get paid for it? And he said, sure, kid, I'll give you a shot.
Mm-hmm.
And within the first 4 months, I just applied everything I knew. And I was his number one producing coach. I was selling $65,000 a month in coaching.
Mm.
So his other coaches were selling something like 10 to 15. So he's like, what are you doing?
Right. Right.
And so eventually I ended up becoming a 1099 president of sales and training for him.
Mm.
And while I was there, a big name guy who was very tall, named Tony Robbins, came along and said, I like what you guys are doing. I'd like to kind of buy in and be part of this process. And then for 7 years, I was with those guys, as well as had my own businesses. So, and I was able to do really great things there. I took their close rate from 17.8% to 43.2% in 4 months.
Mm.
I averaged their average coaching sale was $9,000 a year. I took that to 30,000 a year. And so, I started doing all these things within the company. Well, when you do this for Tony Robbins, what I didn't realize back then, Alex, was you do this for a guy like Tony Robbins, people talk about you and then they start passing you around.
Mm-hmm.
So then it was like Deepak Chopra, Brian Tracy,
Very cool.
all
Very
these
cool.
companies coming toward me. And then eventually, unfortunately, Chet had leukemia and he passed away, and we all kind of moved to a different place. But a guy named Russ Whitney actually picked me up. We met at an event. He didn't literally pick me up, folks. And Russ had $1 billion worth of companies, and he was building a new brand, and he asked me if I would help him. And for those of you who don't know Russ, he also owned a company called Rich Dad Poor Dad. So Kiyosaki was the minority owner of the company. He was the majority owner of that company. And so I helped him, and I didn't realize at the time he was such a big deal too. So then when I helped him, more people came, and that's how my consulting business started off the ground.
That's crazy. It seems like you kind of consulted for a lot of these, really famous like speaker, writer, author types.
Oh, tons of them. And then, I also had we were driving between 1,000 and 3,000 leads a week when I was with Tony and Chet. And so, I was consulting bigger companies there too, as well as on my own. So, I worked with CBS Television, Procter Gamble, Enterprise Rent-A-Car, Nationwide, CBRE, Richard Ellis, big real estate companies.
Yep, we got it.
So, I was helping all those guys and gals in those companies. And so, and then I worked with just literally thousands and thousands of small and medium-sized business owners. So again, I got to refine and hone my craft, which I didn't even know I was doing. But it was really all the stuff that I was doing for Chet Holmes and for Tony Robbins and their businesses. And then I was always in there optimizing things. And that just led to me being able to do it even more because I had some type of process that I didn't even know until down the line.
I'm sure you've sat in hundreds of those seminars now at this point in time, through a bunch of those different, coaches and trainers. Are there certain things that you remember very vividly about certain trainers and coaches and moments?
Yeah. There's a lot of them. So one of them that I built sales teams, commission sales teams for this company. They were called the Ask Method Company.
Okay.
And Ryan Levesque.
Yeah. I read some of that book. Unfortunately, I didn't finish the book, but I got the gist of it, I think.
Yeah. When we started out together, we were doing a few $1 million, and then we were doing about 21 by the time we ended up parting company. And I watched Ryan grow through grit and determination. And Ryan to me is one of the best ever for being able to queue up a lead to a sales team.
Okay.
And so I studied what he did because he was just phenomenal at it. You know, Chet and Tony were really good at it, but I think Ryan was even better. I still think Ryan's better at doing that. And you know, we were killing it. I mean, our close rate on a $20,000 coaching package for the sales team was 62% on average.
Jeez.
So, you know, we had that side dialed in. He had his side dialed in, and it just worked great. And you know, so he was one. I mean, I loved watching Tony because Tony, if people don't realize, Tony is a fantastic salesperson.
Mm-hmm.
And Tony knows how to position. And I watched Tony on stage, and, you know, Tony would always, like, somebody would come in like hot and like attack Tony, right? So instead of, you know, he's Tony Robbins. Why would you attack Tony Robbins?
Right. Why would you come to attack him? Come on.
Right? So, but what Tony would do is Tony would position. He would be able to position, and he'd take himself, without losing respect or trust, he'd be able to take himself down to just a lower level to diffuse the process and emotionally.
Mm-hmm.
And then once he got the guy in agreement, he would then start taking him back up, and eventually Tony would be positioned superior, and the guy would listen to him. And I adapted that into sales because I always teach people, when people are in fear, you can't move them to buying confidence right out of the gate.
Right.
Like, so many people are trying to, like, oh, I got an objection, let's crush it. No, you just drive more fear. Or worse yet, you now create another fear, and it's anchored to the individual versus the actual objection.
Mm-hmm.
So now you get two objections going on, one on the business, one about the person. Bad place to be. So when I saw Tony doing that, I started adjusting even the sales teams and teaching, and I was moving them from, now when we had fear, moving them to neutral first, because that's what Tony was doing,
Mm-hmm.
positioning that way, and then moving from neutral to buying confidence. And it worked great. In fact, we did this on the front end of the sales team. When I got there, they were doing like a 12, I think it was 12.1%. And within, I think it was 4 or 5 months, we were at almost 22% close rate. So we almost double the close rate just by using this type of technique on the front. So I learned a lot. I'd say the guy I probably learned the most from was Russ Whitney. You know, I know Russ today. Russ is a good, I would call him a friend. But when I worked with him on the first stint, it was like 14 months. And I learned more from him in 14 months. The guy just has a brilliant way of looking at things. And I learned a lot about growing companies that I didn't know from Russ.
What were the things you took away?
You don't get emotionally involved in your business.
Interesting.
Number one.
Well, I mean, that seems tough. Like, so what does that fundamentally look like? You don't get emotionally involved.
So Russ had a huge real estate training company and a construction company and a company that would buy buildings and lease them and things like that. And what I would watch him do is they looked at the buildings and what they were doing and buying. Like, they wouldn't necessarily reach if they loved this property, but it wasn't the right fit. They think it makes some money, but it wasn't where they wanted to make the margins.
Mm-hmm.
And I asked him one day, I'm like, why didn't you buy that? Like, you can make money. He goes, you never get in love with the properties you buy unless you're gonna live there.
Mm.
And I said, well, how's that apply to business? And we talked through that. And he's like, the problem is people, they don't objectively look at metrics and numbers and things like that. They get subjectively, like, I've been building this thing for 14 years and I'm at this place. And so then they start making emotional decisions.
Mm-hmm. They do everything they can to hold on to it. It's kind of the sunk cost thing, right?
Exactly. Right. And unfortunately, it's sunk time, and you never can get the time back. You can get the money back down the line. But we built one thing one time, and he always told me, like, we're going to build this to $500,000 a year. When we get it to $500,000, we're all going to have a meeting and decide whether we keep this or not, or just pull the plug. And I was like, what? Like, when I first heard it, it was like such a concept to me that was just foreign to my brain. And I'm like, why? And he said, just because you can build it to 500,000 doesn't mean you can get it to 50.
Right. Totally.
Right. So it was one of those things that I learned a lot of like great lessons from him. So those are three trainers that I really learned a lot from.
Yeah, I mean, I really I like to do a little bit of stock trading, and that's one of the key components of like the best traders is they just don't become emotionally involved in the trade. It's just
Oh
like it's
gosh.
just not working. Like we get rid of it. We take it off the board. Like they don't hold on to their opinions to the point of making a mistake.
Well, if they did, then in the upswing, they might be more inclined to, try to overextend. And in the downswing, they might bail out too early or not early enough, right? Because they're kind of got caught in. It's like when people are in Vegas, right?
Yeah.
They hit the what is it? Not blackjack, but they hit the one armed bandits or whatever,
Yep.
and all the bells are going off. And what do? They stick all their money back in that machine.
Yep.
It's like,
Yep. Yeah, that's
so
the famous South Park scene where they hit on blackjack and then they're like, "We go again." And the kids are like, "What?" And he's like, "You never stop when you're on a heater." And then they lose. It's like, "If
of
we win
course.
again, we'll have 300,000." They're like, "Yeah, roll it." Um,
The people up in behind the windows are just going, "Go ahead, kids,"
yeah. So, all right. So, as far as sales go, so like, let's bring this to my organization. Um, just because I think that's going to be super helpful for me to hear kind of some of your thoughts. So, our client is business to business. We engage with a business that needs our service, and then we make our money when we buy the product from you at wholesale, mark it up, and sell at retail. So we never charge you any fees. Our clients seem to really, really love that. Um,
Yep.
I would say we don't have a really thoroughly built out sales department. We've been fortunate, Doug, that over the last decade, like people have just kind of came to us. I sense that the tides are sort of changing a little bit at our company, in our industry, in that there are just more people doing it. There's more money coming into our industry. There's a little more competition. All the businesses that, you know, maybe didn't really care that much about this space 5 or 10 years ago are now starting to care. And they're like, yeah, we got to take this seriously. So we have more competition from brands insourcing it. Um,
Yep.
so what would be kind of the things that you would coach us up on to like have success? Or do you have like a framework that you're going to run a business through for them to understand? What are the
Yeah.
little micro
Yeah.
habits, the call, the follow-up, the video sales letter, maybe just kind of talk me through your thoughts on that.
Yeah, sure. So the first thing, and this is where people make mistakes all the time. Like, so I don't know enough about your business, right? So if I say, oh, well, based on this or whatever, I would do this, and then you go out and try it, and it works, you're gonna like give me a big hug
Yeah.
or whatever. But if it doesn't work, it's gonna hurt you, right? So financially. So the first thing that I do, always the first thing, is I go in and do what we call a sales optimization study. It's a nice term for I'm doing an audit.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm going to look at everything from the metrics that you're running in the business, the KPIs, what's not running, what is running. I'm going to interview people. I'm going to uncover every stone I can possibly uncover to find out what's working, what's not working, what shouldn't be working, what should be working based on the goals that you and I talk about that you're looking to get.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the fairest way to do it. It's not a lot of money to do it. And we look at it as, hey, if we don't do it, I do a disservice to the person.
Mm-hmm.
I won't even work with anybody any longer unless they let me do that. I mean, it's low money. I cover my time on it. But I'd rather come back to a guy like you, Alex, and say, I can't help you,
Mm-hmm.
but these people can.
Got it.
Right? Versus me going, yeah, thanks for your money. See you, down, 7 months down the line, we find nothing's working, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, or it's working, but not as we expected. So in the process of doing that, we look at ideal right fit buyer. We look at all the metrics. We look at, what are you doing to generate the business today? What is because the master prospector will always outsell the master closer.
Say that one more time. The master prospector will always outsell the master closer.
Yes.
Does that just mean more volume, more outbound volume?
No, it can.
I see.
So
You're
yes, and
finding a better customer to reach out to in the beginning.
yeah. So a lot of times I'll look at companies and they have a maybe even a smaller amount of percentage generating a larger amount of their business. And so I want to know that, because we want to segment that audience, and we want to go more like, in what it used to be like lookalike audiences and like, Meta or whatever
Mm-hmm.
platform, right? We want to try to get as many as those people. Like if they're buying easy, if it's an easy buy, easy purchase that they're coming through, and they're buying, and they're kind of more of a ravenous buyer, and the majority of our money's going here. And I see this happen with companies all the time. And they're spending a lot of time, a lot of money, a lot of energy into other areas that aren't as growth oriented. They might be in love with that market. I just did one just recently where they had a brain health company, and they're trying to sell to people on fixed incomes a $10,000 offer.
Right.
And I'm like, they don't have it, right? It's like, so, but if you look at the people who are buying, if we just target those people, which we started doing, the numbers will go up. And so, I want to look at, because the master prospector has two things. One, they know how to generate qualified, sales ready leads. So there's a lead, a marketing qualified lead. There's a, sales qualified lead, a sales ready lead, and then a purchase order ready lead. We all want purchase order ready leads, but they're not just raining out of the sky.
Right.
So how do we get the marketing, if they want to do marketing, to get it from a marketing qualified or a lead up into the sales ready component of it? That's the key.
Okay.
Now, if we're salespeople and we're generating our own business, we want sales ready, sales qualified leads. That's all we want to be prospecting.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, they might drop down into the marketing qualified here and there, but it's the 80-20 rule. I want 80% of my people that I'm prospecting to be in that sales ready, sales qualified arena.
Mm-hmm.
So we throw all efforts into that. So once we dial that in, then we scale that.
I see. So you're doing that by looking at their current customer makeup, trying to understand who the best customers are, or maybe not even who they currently have, who they maybe should be going after, right?
Exactly.
And then maybe, intuitively and through data, you can find out, hey, these are the layups. When the salesperson gets a person like this, it's a layup. So then you're going to target all of the advertising into that kind of lookalike audience.
Into the messaging that audience is looking for if you're doing marketing. So I'll give you an example. This happened with Intuit.
Okay.
You would think a company like Intuit, sizable company, let's leave it at that. Right?
Yeah.
But they had $100 million division, and it was a division that they were selling checks back then.
Okay.
Paper checks.
Yep. I probably bought them at one point.
They were losing money. They were losing almost $10 million a year on that division. And so when they came to us, that we were like, "You're into it. What's going on?" Like, I couldn't even fathom that they wouldn't have. I mean, they're QuickBooks. Like, how can't they have this dialed in?
Yeah. How do you not have the numbers for this, guys? Come on.
So when we started looking at it, what we realized was, because they were QuickBooks, because they were the big daddy in the business, they were assuming that their brand was going to take enough hold that people would pay more for their checks than Vistaprint or other check writing or check development services.
Mm-hmm.
And so what they were finding was the salespeople were finding that people would call in and they'd say, "Hey, I need to get some checks." Yeah, great. How much were they? And back then they were like, whatever, $80. And it's like, what are you talking about? I can get them on Vistaprint for $45.
Mm-hmm.
What makes your checks better than Vistaprint's checks or whatever?
Right.
Well, we're QuickBooks. Right? It's like, what? Did you hang up? That type of thing. So the sales team was really frustrated.
Mm.
And so we said, wait a minute. Let's look and see if you have the ideal right fit buyer. And they did actually have the ideal right fit buyer, but the messaging was off. So what we did is that we went back and we discovered, what is the messaging that these people are looking for? And believe it or not, check fraud was a concern.
Mm.
Check fraud was just starting to come up, and it was getting kind of well known. And so we did research and forgive me if I don't remember the research at this moment, like exactly to the number, but it was something like 67% of all businesses experience check fraud, and the average loss was between $25,000 and $150,000 or something like that.
Pretty big, yeah. We actually
Okay, never mind.
we had a check fraud incident at our company, and we ended up getting it covered by the bank, but it was like 10 to 12,000.
Yeah. So that's what in a lot of small and medium-sized businesses they were running into this. And back then it was even more rampant because they didn't have all the fraud stuff they have today.
And there was
right?
probably just more people doing checks. I mean, that was like
Oh,
the
yeah,
way
by
that you
far.
paid for everything, basically.
Yeah. Yeah, there were no tap cards. There were no, anything like that,
Yeah.
right? You still had to run your credit card through the paper machine
Yep,
back then.
yep.
And so for those of you who don't know what I'm talking about, you can look it up on YouTube. But the so what we did is we reframed the messaging. And so what ended up happening is the same person would call and say, "Hey, I'm looking for checks." And then we would say, "Well, Mr. Jones, thanks for calling us. We really appreciate you. Are you aware that check fraud now is hitting well over 65% of businesses?" "No, what do you mean?" People are writing checks, people are picking up on this, and they're actually, creating fraudulent accounts and doing all these things, X, Y, Z. And it's costing the average business owner, between $25,000 and $125,000. And then they would inevitably say something like you just did. "You know what? I was down the hardware store the other day and this occurred," right? Or, "Man, my friend who owns a manufacturing company got whacked with that," right? And then we'd say, "Well, yes, sir. So, we here decided to do something for this. We don't want our customers experiencing that. And so we have check fraud protection built into our checks. And so while we have check fraud protection built into our checks, that is preventing that from happening at a way higher percentage than it would happen if you didn't have that. But unfortunately, they're a little bit more money than what they were without that. And in the case you even got hit by check fraud, we also have an insurance policy based on this that it would cover the check fraud for you." And they would say, "Well, how much more is it?" "Oh, it's just a little bit more." "Well, okay, well, would you like to hear more about it?" And they would be like, "Yes, by all means." Sales went from a $10 million loss to a $7 million gain in that 1 year.
Pretty good.
And I tell that story not to, like, hey, that's impressive, but to impress upon people that if they don't have the ideal right fit buyer, if they don't have that down and they don't understand what their people want, what the people need, what the people desire, what they fear on the business return on investment, personal return on investment, and why they're buying, then their messaging will be off. And when their messaging's off, marketing's off, conversations are off, appointment setting ratios are off, right? So we track all of those metrics going through. And Alex, when we track these metrics will tell us something's up or whatever. Then we dive into the story in the audit. And we figure out why this is happening or why it's not happening. Why are we generating all these leads and our appointment ratio is super low? Or why are we generating all these appointments and our close rate's really low? What's the difference between top producers and non-top producers? Like, we look at all of that stuff. What is their follow-up ratios? We know most people are abysmal at follow-up is probably a better way of saying it. And then we start also looking at like intangibles, like what's the mindset of the people who are actually doing these jobs in the business, all the way through each division and each department. And then you come up with this story, and believe it or not, you usually come up with a ton of money for the company.
What are the metrics that you want to be seeing basically every sales department track? Like, are there
number of outreaches? So whether it's an inbound lead or an outbound lead, you count it as an outreach, like when you're reaching out.
Okay.
Well, Chet, don't kill me from the grave, right? So when I first got to Chet Holmes' company, I tracked the leads back just like I'm doing now. And he had 17,000 leads never followed up on.
Jeez. That's a lot of money lost, or
$13.
Or
$13.
New money gained if you can just follow up with them.
Well, so what did we do? As I was hiring new salespeople that were always constantly coming in, they would work these 2-year-old leads. And it was like you had to sell 3 things or you never made it to the sales team. And guess what? They were making it to the sales team. So it's not just Chet Holmes' company that was like that.
Yeah.
It's a big problem for companies usually. on dormant leads.
And is that so like what about like so you're talking about a lot of data, which I totally understand because if you want to one
Yeah.
of our core values is predictability. If you want to predict like how do I get to 10 million, then you need to be able to work that backwards to how much outbound you need, right? Um but I think like the collection of that data is maybe a difficult thing. Like what have you seen actually be helpful for that data collection? Are there tools? Is it just somebody who's like really busy on the Excel spreadsheets?
All of the above when we first started out, especially, I mean, I have a personalized, meaningful, relevant follow up SaaS system. So I usually solve the problem with follow up with that for
Yep.
people. But I also built in like metrics tracking type things as well that we use. With AI, it's a little easier because you can create certain things to create automation. Um, but it's if nothing else, if somebody's just starting out,
Mhm.
the question is, what are the KPIs that are really important to your business?
Sales,
Okay,
profit.
what
Yeah.
right? So basic things, and then dial it back a little bit
Mhm.
more. What profit do you want in your
Okay.
sales? And then we start to say, well, I would like a 62% profit. I'm making this up.
Okay.
And so, okay, so what is giving us this?
What
Right?
type of customer?
Yeah, what type of customer, what type of scenario. Is it a long sales cycle? Is it a short sales cycle? Is it, a certain digital, non-digital, like you want to look at the parameters and then dial it back again. It's like, okay, so we know I'm just making this up. It's a short sales cycle, but it's on, we got a 80% digital, 20% labor with whatever, right? And it seems to be specifically more in B2B areas around construction, HVAC, roofing, and attorneys. Like, why attorneys, right? So,
Mhm.
and medical doctors, I'll throw them in too, right? So we know we kind of there. And then so now it gives us investigative power to keep looking at, well, okay, so now we got that. Let's look at those 5 categories. Who's the most profitable in what order, and who's the easiest for us to sell?
Mhm.
How many leads are we generating to those particular areas? Well, you know what? Our most profitable thing, we're generating the least amount of leads possible to that.
Mm.
Aha. Why is that? Well, because the marketing department made a decision to do XYZ. Well, can we peel 10% of that budget off every month and start moving a little more to this side to see if that ups our numbers?
Mhm.
So we're gonna be like an investigative reporter on the KPIs that we want, and then we're gonna track the sub metrics that lead to that KPI. And yeah, it can be on a spreadsheet, and it can be tedious, and it can be, you know, um, personally, I love this stuff, but some people don't.
Yeah.
Um, but on a sales team, for example, outbound reaches to response rates or connection rates would be the next one.
Okay.
Just because they're reaching out, they're not connecting, right? You make 100 phone calls and you get one person on the call. Why? That's a story. Well, guess what? We're calling around the time frame. No one's there,
Mhm.
right? So connection rates to responses, responses to appointment ratios to either presentations, or if you want to skip that to close sales to follow up closes, close sales to transactional value increase. Do we upsell? Do we cross sell? Do we downsell? Right, those type of things. From there to increase buying frequency. How many times can we get them to buy again
Mm.
from that process? The sales team should be tracking these things. The next one would be, instead of buying frequency, how many new clients are we extending through our initial relationship?
Oh, okay. So like
I.e.
referrals. Yeah.
referrals, internal and external referrals. So if it's a company, we're internally generating new business within the company, but now also, hey, they got friends, they got partnerships, they got this, they got other businesses,
Mhm.
right? We're going through there. So tracking those particular metrics, and then tracking what's the sales cycle time, right? That will also tell you a number. But those basic metrics are if people just track those, they'll get an epiphany.
Mm.
Let's put it that way.
So is it been your experience that when you have all those metrics, you can kind of like read the story along kind of the chain of command.
Yeah, sometimes the story is a little bit elusive. Like, um, the reason that I, for example, was able to take that close rate I told you from 12.1 to 20, I think it was 21.78% or something like that, was because I was looking at the metrics and I'm like, never mind the 17,000 leads at that point, but it was more of a, what's happening to this? We're generating this many leads, but only this many are actually making it to the sales team.
Okay.
And so I was like, what? Like, is the router off? Like, lead disposition is a technology issue. And then what I discovered by looking at it, because I was just like, what's going on? Is I discovered that the sales manager was actually looking at the leads and disqualifying them before they even had an opportunity to hit the funnel.
Was that like a metric thing that he didn't want the close rate to drop or something?
There you
Yeah.
go. He wanted to keep his job.
Mm,
And so they were looking at it and say, well, no, this company's under this revenue. So out.
mm,
And it was like, well, why aren't we selling the smaller company something else?
right, for sure.
Right. And so what I did is I revamped that process. And believe it or not, some of these smaller companies were actually spending $35,000 with us because they were startup companies that were highly funded.
Ah, interesting. Okay, so people don't have their data. People maybe don't have their, what do you call it? The ideal customer profile, or
Yes.
um, they don't have their ideal customer. Maybe they don't have the messaging aligned. What are the other things that you commonly will see people are not able to do to get those
They're
sales?
not training their people.
Okay, they're
They're not
sales
training.
reps.
Yeah. I mean, here's the thing about salespeople. If you leave them to their own device, it's not just the salespeople. It's like they have a customer service department. And a customer service department, from my point of view, should be a sales department.
Yep.
But a lot of them think this is a customer service department. They just have customer service and that's it. And folks, if you want a really great example of this, call GoDaddy, buy a domain from GoDaddy, and then call them and talk to them, and you will buy multiple
Yeah.
things
Right.
from them, right? Because they're fantastic at it. And so I look at each department or division as it's a sales opportunity. Operations is a sales component
Okay.
from my point of view. So we want to look at what can we optimize to enhance the customer journey experience so the customer is elated so that they want to buy more stuff.
I got
right?
it. Yep. So basically, everywhere along the chain of communication to the customer, people are still selling the customer.
Yeah, I'll give you an example. So my daughter, my youngest daughter, was having some stomach challenges. And I have a doctor that I go to that I like, and she's been going to another doctor and not really helping out. But this guy's a functional medicine doctor and an MD,
Okay.
and he just looks at things differently. Looks at them from both sides, east versus west, so to speak, in medicine. And so I talked to him the other day, and I said, would you talk to my daughter? And he goes, I'd love to. I said, I'll pay a diagnostic fee, I'll pay the fee, whatever. Just, please help her. And he said, sure, be happy to. So I gave the number to my daughter, and she called in today and talked to the front end people.
Mm-hmm.
And they're like, well, we don't do this. So I'm not going to schedule you an appointment. And I'm like, so my daughter's like, I talked to her later, and she's like, Dad, I don't understand what happened. These people are super rude on the front end.
Right.
Now, my daughter's highly skilled in the art of selling
Mm-hmm.
and people perception. Right. And I said, well, what do you mean? She told me, she's like, so I call up because I know the people. I'm like, what's going on? Well, I can't do this because it doesn't fit our exact profile. I'm like, your boss said, call and get in. She goes, well, are you unhappy? I said, would I be on this call if I was happy?
Yeah. Right. Right.
Having this conversation. So long story short, we did work it out, but that's an example of how, man, client gone. Now, worse yet, her age, even older now, social media. This company
Yeah.
was so rude.
Negative review. Yep.
Yeah. And so now there's the trickle down effect, right? And so now somebody was like, well, I would go to this company because I saw all these good reviews, but what, oh my gosh, no, and gone. And so we want to look at each and every single step. And, here's the thing. You can't do all this in 15 minutes. Like, it takes time
Mm-hmm.
to look through these things. But when one does and they follow the story, we corrected this, right? It's like the old, I had a hip replacement done,
Mm-hmm.
Alex. So for years I suffered with this thing, and I was just like, got to a dragging leg. Like, I walk in the sand and I look like a snail
Oh
was,
boy.
behind me, right? But I was having all these neck problems and shoulder problems and joint problems in the upper body. And when the hip was fixed, all of that went away. So cause and effect. If you got a problem, you don't treat the symptoms of the problem. You remove the cause of the problem, and therefore you don't have the problem.
Mm.
So when we look at some of these things, like removing the front end when somebody's answering the phone like that, imagine being a dentist office that's a high performing dentist office, like lots of calls coming in, and somebody is just rude to that person that, hey, I'm, whatever. Or they're not even rude. They're just having a really rough day. And it's like Debbie Downer, on the thing. Who wants to go into a dentist office in the first place? Never mind go into a dentist office that they're kind of like pushing back all the time on you.
Mm-hmm.
And you're thinking, man, they don't care.
Mm-hmm.
And, you take what a dentist makes per average client. And let's say, in that dental office, that's worth $3,500 a year to that dentist. And they're burning off 100 of them a year. That's 350 grand a year gone.
Mm.
Run that over 5 years, you're talking $1.8 million.
That's pretty green revenue to lose out just because you don't know how to answer the
Yeah.
phone to communicate with people. Doug, I want to ask you about commission salespeople, because this seems like something that so many people have a really tough time with, is like figuring out this commission versus base or commission plus base. And how do I incentivize the salespeople? And wait a minute, now the sales guy's making all the money at the company. So how do you think about that? And what have you seen be successful for all parties involved?
Yeah. So, firstly, if they're commission only salespeople and they're making all the money at the company and you own the company, in most cases, you should be elated,
Mm-hmm.
right? Now, and it's funny. It's very weird. I remember when I was selling music equipment, the owner of the company came to me and he said, "You're making more money than I am." And I'm like, "Is that a
Mm-hmm.
challenge?" Like, I'm on commission. So if I'm making money, aren't you making money? He goes, "Oh, I'm making a ton of money, but you're making more than I
Uh-huh.
am." And I'm like, "Okay, what are you trying to say? You want to fire me? You want to no, I want you to stay here, but I just want you to know."
Yeah.
And so people get a little weird on those type of
Yep.
things,
I've seen that
right?
exact situation.
I mean, let's say you're paying a salesperson 20%. And I don't know, to get the numbers easy, let's say after you're done paying the sales team, cost of goods, everything that you're paying for, the whole overall thing, you're netting 30%.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so if that salesperson goes out and sells $10 million a year, and you're paying that salesperson 20%, 2
Mm-hmm.
million, but you're netting 3. Why wouldn't you want that person to go sell $100 million a
Mm-hmm.
year and still pay that person more money, right? But a lot of human. Now, I will agree that, well, if the company scales up and the profit margin starts shrinking, and we've got to look at those type of things when we're building out the plan. But the reality is that in most cases, if they're on commission only sales, you want them to sell more and more and more and more and more, because you make it, if you set the plan up correctly. If you set it up incorrectly and you're finding you're at the negative end, then you want to nip that off as quick as possible. But what happens is people don't watch that, and then they grow and they have no agreement with the commission only salesperson that, hey, if we get to a certain volume in the company, then in order to continue to grow the company, our margins get tight, we will adjust
Mm,
commissions. That's the biggest problem with
okay.
that, right? So, so what specific questions on and around commission only sales? Because I've done a lot of it, so I think I can probably
Well,
help.
just like, how do you decide? Well, one, I feel like my friends who are hiring commission only sales reps, and maybe this is just industry wide, but so many of them end up just not working out, right?
Mm-hmm.
So,
Mm-hmm.
how do you find the right people that are going to be successful? Because, even if they are exclusively commission, you spend a ton of time training them and you prep them and you feed them leads. And then if they
Yeah,
bail out 6 months later, it's like, that was such a waste of time.
you lost a lot of
Yeah.
money.
And,
That's what happens,
and then,
right? Time and
maybe, talk to me about the pros and cons of giving them some sort of a base plus commission. Um, then you kind of know that this person will probably stick around for at least some period of time, but you don't know they'll be productive. Um,
well, what that is true,
yeah,
and then you will lose money on that,
yeah,
right? So
yeah. Risk
know,
in every direction.
well, so how do you mitigate that? How do you minimize the risk? So usually the mistake is made on the front end. Now, I will quote Warren Buffett's partner. If you get hiring right 50% of the time, you're doing great.
Yep,
Right?
yep.
So here's the thing. When the first question is when you're looking for a salesperson is what do you want them to do specifically? And it can't be I just want them to sell.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what a lot of people. So let's say in the the thing of you're generating leads or someone's generating leads and then passing them to a salesperson, right? What do you want in the makeup of that salesperson? So we've got to step back and say, okay, who's the ideal right fit buyer? The ideal right fit buyer is that person probably in your case, I don't know yet because I haven't done the investigative work, but probably from what I'm hearing is that ideal right fit buyer is like, Alex, no. I don't want your base salary. I want to make more money.
Mm-hmm.
I don't need your base salary. I need highly qualified leads that I can close.
Mm-hmm.
So is that the person we're looking for, right? We must ask these questions up front because what ends up happening most of the time, Alex, is they will go out, people will go out and they're going to go, I'm going to hire a sales team. And they'll say, oh, you're a breathing body that says you're a salesperson. And they bring them in and they say, we're going to train you on all the product knowledge, all this, all that, all that. But they never tested for things like ego strength, or they never tested for empathy.
Mm.
They never tested for, are they consultative sellers? They never tested for, do they have the will to sell?
Mm.
These things can be tested. And so what we want to do is like, okay, let's say you want the perfect mate. Who is he or
Mm-hmm.
she? Well, in my case, she was born in Poland. She's 5'4", has brown eyes, brown hair, has a master's degree, highly, I would say not religious, but very spiritual in the fact of how she carries herself, and you get very specific categories, I don't want her over 120 pounds. I want, her to want this many kids. I want her to, great cook, whatever it is for somebody. When we look at a personal profile, it's called match.com for a reason, right? That this is what they
Mm-hmm.
do. They align up all of these values and beliefs and attributes that people are looking for. But when it comes to hiring salespeople, people don't do
Mm-hmm.
this. So then what do? They write an ad. And the ad says something like, hey, we're looking for salespeople. This is what you could probably make here. Come one, come all. Well, that's not the right fit ad if you need somebody that has high ego strength. For example, ego strength is high
Mm-hmm.
self-confidence. If it's too high, it's called arrogance. If it's too low, they won't
Mm.
close. They'll get the person to the place where they're like, the person's like, just ask me to go out with you and I will.
Yeah.
Just ask me to go out with you and I will. And they never ask,
Mm. Do
right?
you have like a specific test that you like to utilize to get some of those
Yeah.
metrics?
Yeah. So there's different ways of testing. Some of them can be um,
Hmm.
assessments, certain, but sales specific criteria, not personality
Yeah,
assessments.
right.
The disc profile does not tell us, Myers-Briggs does not tell us, your color score does not tell us, if you are a sales specific person. So you can use some of the assessments on, that are out there, and questioning, and structured interviews. So, like, how many people hire on gut feel,
Oh yeah, for sure.
right? It's like, no. That's like finding you got all the right perfect profile and you hire on gut feel and you find out I'm married to this person, but they're married to 3 other
Mm.
people. And it's like, whoops, right? Now you're in a situation where it's not fun. And so, but when you're in a sales scenario, you find out they're working for other companies and yours, and they're cherry picking the best leads from certain companies, including yours. And you're generating these leads, and the ones that can be closed, but just aren't like that closed so easily, they just, whoop, oh, you don't have 17,000 leads? Oh, never followed up on why. Or, you know what? Oh, they're under 300,000. We don't want to deal with
Mm.
it, right? And so, but you as the owner are paying to generate these leads, et cetera, et cetera. So we want to get as clear of a picture as possible on who that person is, and then design a structured way of bringing that person through a structured process where we can lead score them like we would a lead.
Okay.
We test for the things that we want. Like, so I'll give you an example. When I ran the thing for Chet and Tony Robbins, the first part of our funnel we did on radio. We generated a radio ad. Hey, we got these great reports. This is Tony Robbins, this is Chet Holmes, got these great reports. Call in, we'll give you a free report. They would call in, and we had a live person answer. Okay, what's your email address? Hey, thank you, Alex. It's nice to meet you, et cetera, et cetera. Hey, may I ask you a few questions? Talk about your business, et cetera, et cetera. Geez, Alex, I think you probably really benefit from one of our amazing 2.5 hour trainings. And may I tell you about it? Well, I don't know. Well, Alex, you did say you wanted to grow your company. Yes. Yeah. Right. Now that's ego strength. That's confidence. That's bringing forth, like, not just letting the person go off.
Hmm.
If they have too much empathy and not enough ego strength, they'd be like, okay, Alex, well, that was great. Thanks. Have a nice day. Here's your free report.
Mm. So you need like almost that confidence to be able to be like, you're wrong. You don't know what you need. Trust me, I know what you need, sort of.
But in a very respectful
Right.
way. Now, if they were super high ego strength, they'd be like, Alex, I don't understand. What the hell's the matter
Yeah,
with you?
right, right,
You said you wanted to grow your company. Do you or don't you?
right.
Right? So we want to measure for all of that, and then we want to test all these scenarios. Too many people are in such a hurry to hire someone that they don't test these things, and it's like, again, dating analogy, right? You go out on 2 dates. Let's get married. Yeah, great. Oh, what do you have children? I didn't know that. Well, I was going to tell you after we get married.
Yeah, right.
That type of thing. And so it's you don't want to get caught in that trap. And if they don't have structured interviews or structured processes, we don't know how to fairly lead score it. So we might say, well, geez, I love this person. They're a really good person, but we didn't test for these things. Then we bring them forth and we find out they're not trainable.
Mm.
They're not going to do what you ask. They don't want to work the hours, even though we talked about it. They sold themselves in. They're doing these type of things, or they're not following process that you
Right.
wanted. Right? So these are all the things that we've got to test up front.
And then how do you decide on commission, percentages, and maybe tiers and bonuses? And then also, what about that base salary idea? What have you decided on that?
So firstly, keep commissions as simple as possible.
Yeah.
That's another big mistake that people make. I've gone into companies and they have, like, the insurance industry is crazy like this, right? It's like telecommunications was insane. They had like a commission structure for every little piece of everything, and they were all different. And like it was difficult to track. They actually had companies that actually created software aggregators to understand the commissions that were coming through from the
Jeez.
carriers. Right? It was that
When
crazy.
they probably would have been
So
better suited to just say like 1%, or 2% or
whatever,
whatever.
right? Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
right. You get 10% on this, you get 20% on that, whatever it is based on your ability to
Hmm.
pay and make a healthy profit. Then we got to look at what happens down the line if we grow and we have this expansion. So we might say, look, we're here. Here, we're going to reevaluate this. There's a possibility this could drop to
Yeah.
this. Then it's up front,
Okay.
right? So, or you build it in from the beginning where it's acceptable in the upfront, and then as you go there, you don't have to worry about. But that's where your buffers come in. Like if you want to pay a bonus, no problem. Let's figure out what the bonus is that's not going to tank the ship,
Hmm.
so to
Hmm.
speak. So, but the reality is that in most businesses, the people that most people want, if they're going to be sellers, if they're going to be people who want to make money, which is what you want in a sales
Hmm.
job, you want to pay as much commission as you can and keep the base
Okay.
negligible. Now, there are exceptions. If you have a long sales cycle,
What do you define
like,
as long? What's your definition?
depends on the industry. So, for example, let's say we're selling super high end jumbo
Okay.
jets. That might be a 2-year process. You're going to have to pay a base salary,
Hmm.
right, to keep people going through. But I talked to a gentleman who had a biotech company, and his sales cycle was 4 months. But he was paying base salaries between $125,000 and $250,000 a year.
Geez, sign me up.
Yeah, and he only hired PhDs, right? So when I talked to him, I'm like, why?
Yeah.
Why is it? It's a 4-month sales cycle, right? Let's cut the bases, give them more incentive on commissions. But in fact, on his people, when I looked at them, 80% of them had to go.
Yeah. Wait until we tell him about the pharmaceutical sales industry where they just get pretty girls and guys to go into the doctor's office.
Yeah, walk in, hey doc, how you doing? Hi, whatever, right? So it's the we and again we got to look at that, right? So if you're selling in the pharmaceutical industry, you probably not want to have Santa Claus walking through the door.
Hmm.
Santa may not have the ego strength to get through that door. I love Santa Claus. Don't get me wrong. My kids were not happy when I told them that Santa doesn't
Yep.
exist. But the point being is that we've got to be really crystal clear. Take our time on the front end. I want blue eyes and dark hair and this type of thing. And if we don't do that, we end up in a bad spot most of the time.
Hmm.
And so you want to structure the commission so that they have high upside earning potential if they're selling. So you're not paying out $225,000 a year to two of your salespeople who hadn't sold anything in a
Right.
year.
And also, I would imagine that's a bit of a self-sortation method that if you're a salesperson, you really believe in yourself, you'll take a commission-only sales job because you go, "Oh, I understand what this commission structure is." But if you're
Absolutely.
like
As
really
long,
nervous, you're like, I really want a $50,000 base."
yeah, and again, if you have a setter on the front end, you're probably going to pay something on a base, right? Because the setter's not generally going to get a high enough commission. But if you can structure, and people thought I was crazy because, like in the marketing industry or the training industry, I was like, they're like, you're not paying your setters basis. I'm like, no, I'm paying them a high commission,
Mm.
right? And so they'd be like, how are you getting away with that? I'm like, you do it the way I'm talking about, right? And you find the people like, I want to make $100,000 a year as a setter. Here's how you do a qualified set
Hmm.
them, and have people who are doing that. So sometimes you don't need to pay a base at all, sometimes you do. It depends on the cycle of the sale, what you're selling, different factors.
Interesting.
I know that's not like a firm hard answer, but it really is the firm
No,
hard
no,
answer.
those are good pieces of information. And what has been your experience? Like, what is there one trait that you've seemed to find with salespeople that you can say this person's probably going to be successful, or do you really have to do a deep dive assessment? And then even when you do the assessment, you still go, for some reason this person just didn't work out.
All of the above, but if you had to look at, like, if you did nothing I was telling you about, and please don't do that, folks, you want to look for that person who's highly motivated and has discipline and success in other things they've done. Like, if anything else, you're like, I just can't do anything, then I would say don't do it at all in most cases. But or prepare yourself for what could happen, right? Because it with high probability it likely will. But if nothing else, look at their past success, not as, like, forget the resume. Most people lie on a resume, right? You use the resume as a tool to poke holes in the story, but look at, where are they a 4th degree black belt in something? We made a great hires off of bungee jumpers. We wanted people with high ego strength, high confidence. You either got to be insanely crazy to jump off a bridge tied with rubber bands around you, or you got to be really confident, one or the other, or both, right? So you look at their past histories and successes. It doesn't matter their educational experience in most cases, unless it's required for the job. Like, if you can't, like in the insurance industry, you got to pass the insurance test, so that matters. But it doesn't matter if you have 4 master's degrees in something else, right? It doesn't matter if you're an engineer, or it doesn't matter if you have a degree in, musical theory. It does not matter, or musical performance. Doesn't mean one's going to be better than the other. But if they have 4 master's degrees, that tells you at least they stick through things, right? So we want to look at their past successes. Military history is a good one. If they've been in, and they've been in the military, they were in a disciplined field. If they rose up through the ranks in that, they had to have some type of discipline and some type of drive. Ask them what they're doing this for, why they're doing this. Have them tell you about their life story growing up. See if there's any holes in there. Like, you can do certain things, but really there's no substitute for what we were just talking about.
Doug, do you think there's anything that we didn't cover about selling that you feel like people really miss out on?
Yeah, the mindset of it, right? That's a big part of success. And, a lot of people don't like sales because they think sales is this when it's not this, so to speak. So, to me, sales is a super noble thing, because we're selling for 2 reasons, really. People are looking for, how do I solve a problem? How do I gain a goal? And wow, an opportunity came up. I think I can get my problem resolved, or my goal, right? And so what better position are we there? Somebody's had a problem for 4 years, and now we can help them resolve that through what we do. Well, don't we deserve it? Don't they deserve it? Don't we have a moral obligation to see it through so that they actually consume what's there? Right? Because otherwise we just let them go off and do their thing that they've been doing. Like, it's probably a good thing I wasn't a doctor, because I would look at somebody and say, listen, you know what? You're 78 pounds overweight. You're going to die. Right? So let me help you not die in the next 2 years, right? Because your heart tested this, and the data shows this, and the data, with a probability of X, you're not going to be around for 2 years unless we do this. I would feel an obligation to show up at their door every morning to make sure that they went out for that walk that they were supposed to do, right? And that's another trait you want to look at on the salespeople. Are they willing to go the extra mile, or extra 100 miles, right? Not because they're so empathetic, but because they know that this person needs to have this. I've had conversations with CEOs of major, major, major companies where I've had to ask them questions like this. So how long have you been lying to yourself? that takes a little bit of self-confidence when you're sitting with somebody who's, sitting at the helm of a multi-billion-dollar corporation.
Mm-hmm.
And so, but if I didn't ask that question, they wouldn't have moved.
Mm.
So, but I'm helping them solve a problem, or, they've got a goal and they've had a goal to be this for this many years. And I guess you could look at it as they have a problem because they didn't get it there, but they have the goal and they want to get this
Mm-hmm.
goal. Isn't it cool if we could help them get that goal? Because selling is not just making money off a product or service. Selling is helping people achieve things that they're looking to
Mm-hmm.
do. And nothing, if we just look at this microphone, the one you're speaking into, or the earphones, or the cups, or the, what's on your wall, or the paint, or the shirt you're wearing, someone sold that to someone else.
Mm-hmm.
Or you and I would be, talking with no microphone, no technology. We'd have to be next to each other. We wouldn't have shirts on and we wouldn't have beautiful backgrounds, right? So, that's the reason. And people buy for a business return on investment, a personal return on investment. They're constantly weighing my fear versus my confidence in this
Mm-hmm.
situation. And we, as the seller, must listen to them and help them cross that bridge of, don't move them right to buying confidence, but fear to neutral to buying confidence based on the personal return and the business return on investment they're looking for, tied back to what problem they're trying to solve, or what goal are they trying to get.
Mm-hmm.
And if you just do that and you follow that methodology in selling, folks, you'll sell more, because people do want to buy from people that actually they feel have their back.
Mm. Doug, that was fantastic. Where can people catch up with you and find some of your stuff? And I know you talked about that, like sales overview. Maybe where could people, find that, or the different ventures you're involved in?
Yeah, I mean, they can reach out to me at doug@ceosalesstrategies.com, plural on sales and strategies. That's my email address. My cell phone number, people are like, why do you give your cell phone number? I'm like, we're all people. Please, for the love of whatever, don't text spam me.
Yeah.
That's what right? But it's 832-549-4836. If you want to know more about me, you can just type in Doug Brown Revenue Growth. I'll be
Mm-hmm.
everywhere. And by the way, that's purposeful, right? Because when you're everywhere, the perception is, yeah, this guy knows what he's doing,
Mm-hmm.
or this gal knows what they're doing. Or if they want to get me on LinkedIn, it's Doug Brown 123.
All right. Beautiful, Doug. Thank you so much, man. I really appreciate you spending a bunch of time with me. It was just super informative, and you clearly know your stuff, and you've done it for a long time at a really high level.
Well, thanks, Alex. I'm really, really grateful to be here, and you give me an opportunity to be on the Entrepreneur, among other things, podcast. Thanks so much.
Appreciate you.